what exactly does a dialogue lead do?
In generalities, without getting into my super day-to-day and, revealing and just doing a documentary about how we cook the game or whatever, there's a varying amount of stuff that we do in terms of like working with actors and getting performances and working with narrative teams to tell good stories. I personally manage a group of people and help them, build the products that we build. And whether that be like seasonal games or yearly games or whatever, imagining new monsters, imagining new use of voice in games, imagining what we were talking about with like repetition and how much content that we're putting out. All of like anything and everything to do with getting that all down the pipe, creating, like working with performers to create those performances, working with relative vendors and recording studios, getting all that content in, managing the content, making that content sound good in a vacuum, making it sound good in a mix, making sure it doesn't clash with everything, making sure that we help the teams localize it and get built into a bunch of different languages. Because as you said, Annie, like to have if you're German and you hear, Destiny or whatever other game in your home language, it brings you into the experience and tells you that like this is important to you and the studio cares about you and this is a universal experience, rather than forcing you to play it in English in a bad chopped up way, right? Or that you don't understand part of what's going on, even if you speak second language or whatever. We want to make sure that these games are for everyone. And so sometimes do well in that, sometimes we don't. But that's effectively like all of those related things. It could be any given day that I'm focused on any individual part of that. But I'm concerned as a dialogue lead or the gray-haired dialogue lead, being more senior, obviously. I am concerned with the high-level overview of that to make sure that all the individual parts run really, really well. Sometimes I'm jumping in and going, okay, I'm going to take this part of a project on and this is going to be my thing to do. But more often than not, I'm going, okay, this part of the project needs to be done. What does that need to be done? Like, how do we need to do that? What is what we call in scope or out of scope? Like, because when you're working with creatives, you come up with new cool ideas and you're like, ooh, I want to do this, but then that's going to take 3 more days. And being the arbiter of going like, that's a great idea, but let's save that for another time. Or, that's a great idea. Let's not do this other idea we were going to do and, devote our time to that. So I'm managing expectations and scope of work and making sure that everybody's taken care of constantly. And also, if anything breaks or anything to fire, then if you have lead under your title, then you're responsible for it too. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Thinking how to ask this question, because you said you cannot go much into the details, but we ask all of our guests, how does their day-to-day look like? So I'm thinking if maybe we should approach it from the perspective, because you are more in the, let's say, the senior role, but by that I mean that not that you have the gray hair, but you're more experienced and you're more there to manage a team of people to get the job done. But if I was, let's say, interested in getting into dialogue, I don't know what could be my first, let's say, entry role. So how would, pick something and maybe try to give us a very general day-to-day for that kind of a role instead of your own, which is mostly about managing and leading.
Well, I can try to give you some of my day-to-day. The hard part about my day-to-day is not even just the detail. It's just that it changes so often. Mm-hmm. Because as a lead in a project or multiple projects or what have you, as a designer who is entry level, you are more so focused on a task, right? Mm-hmm. And whether it's dialogue or whatever else, it may be, hey, there's a character that we need to design a voice for. So we have this performer who's done something and we need to turn them into a monster. Mm-hmm. Or we need to not turn them into a monster, but, just do something interesting to their voice or whatever, or not do anything at all and be aware of that. But then that becomes a task for the designer to do, right? And it depends on their level of seniority and how good they are at the job of how much creative leeway do they get in that? How much time do they spend in that? What did the revisions look like? What does the collaboration look like? What other teams do they need to talk to? Blah, 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 whatever, and how self-led they are too. But usually like a designer's job is to take on a set of tasks, right? And to get those tasks done. As a lead, I'm thinking about all the tasks, right? And making sure that each of those tasks has owners and thinking about the product as a whole rather than the individual task. And I am effectively delegating the details of the tasks in a lot of ways. And I'm the arbiter of maybe quality, we could say, right? And sometimes like schedule and time is the arbiter of quality instead of a human. You know, we can only do so much that we can do, but it's mostly, my day might change from going to a voiceover session to different meetings and then tasking people out and, you know, working on the back end of making sure the product continues to roll, or, you know, in an offhand time, which usually isn't so much these days, and partially because I hold myself back from it, but I could go do a voice design myself if I wanted to or needed to, or, you know, we had too much work and I needed to jump into something. But that's usually, if you're talking about an entry-level person, they're usually getting into the nitty-gritty detail work of designing voices or figuring out why the game is broken and why there's bugs and fixing that and reporting back with that and being really, really into the weeds on that work and being an expert in figuring out the details, right? And then as you grow in your career, you have to move yourself away from the details, teach other people how you've always done your work, train someone up so that you can take on other tasks and responsibilities.
What are some of the possible career paths if you're interested in dialogue? At the very beginning, we talked about narrative and also the audio part, the tech part, which is what you do. But let's say I'm interested in dialogue in general. Like, how can I start or where can I grow my career around dialogue?
Yeah, it all like if you're interested in writing and story crafting, there's a bunch of opportunities in narrative. If you're interested in being a talent and a performer, become an actor, right? That's a thing that contributes to it. And there's not a lot of people who go like, I'm going to specialize in dialogue for games as an actor, right? That being that specific about what you want is, regardless of what you're doing, is the fast track to get you to the place where you want to go, because then you're going to remove all of the other options, right?
Right.
And then if like somebody goes, well, what if I want to hire you for my Hollywood movie? You're not going to turn it down, right? So yeah, there's the being a talent itself. There's working on the audio side and like the quality of that. There's being a voice director, a talent director, right? So you can coach the talent and pull out from all of the narrative folks what the story is supposed to be and what what we're trying to convey, and then coaching talent to be able to deliver that in a studio. There is the studio engineer and operator, right? So you can be the person who's actually functionally recording the audio that goes onto the computer that talents are speaking, right? You can be a coordinator who's coordinating scripts and making sure that all the scripts get into the right places and that all the talent's saying the right thing and that we have all the information correct. The words match the speech that was delivered by the talent and the words aren't wrong. You know, even down to like talent agents and stuff like that. With the audio part of it, even with dialogue, if we're breaking out of games, you can do production work on films. You can be a boom pole operator, hold a microphone above people, or put lavalier wireless microphones on people and capture live performance, right? There's even if it's reality TV and we're doing, something that's real but staged, all of these people have to be mic'd up. All of that stuff has to get recorded. All of that stuff has to be put somewhere and then, has to get edited. And on films, there's people who do the live on set capture where they're holding a microphone, and then there's people who just do the mixing and the capturing, and that might be a 2-person team. And then there's all the post-production that goes in with that. There's people who work in TV who are literally just dialogue editors, right? So if you've ever watched a cooking show before, if you've ever watched Food Network and a Food Network competition cooking show, then you hear how people will speak in sound bites, right? And it doesn't really match up because they've stolen all these takes from different places to have the person say something and craft something that the director wants to be said in the story, right? But nobody actually gave that soundbite. Well, there's a person cutting all that together, right? And making that sound as good as possible, whether it's good or bad. We call that a Frankenbite in the. But yeah, there's like all sorts of different avenues, whether it be on the storytelling narrative side or the audio specific side, or even like talent and auxiliary people who make it come together. It takes a huge city to bring any entertainment production that you want to do to life.